Hello and welcome to my channel. To celebrate hitting 25,000 subscribers, I asked you to send in your piano questions, and a lot of you did. So I chose 25 great questions to answer for you. Now that's more than I can cover in a single video, so I'm starting a new series called 25K Q&A, and this is the first video in that series. Today we're going to talk about how to structure your practice, how to maintain pieces that you've already played, how to play without looking down, and we're also going to talk about Hanon and whether or not you should even practice it. So let's get started. Let's start with a question about how to structure your practice time. Evelyn asks, how long should one focus on chords, arpeggios, and chromatic exercises versus working on a music piece in a 1.5-hour practice session? Now, Evelyn, this is something a lot of people struggle with. There is so much we want to cover, and it's easy to get stuck figuring out where to start or how to divide your time. The exact amount of time you spend on exercises versus repertoire ultimately depends on your specific goals, but that said, a good default you can start from, just because you asked for a number, if you have a 90-minute session, you probably want to spend 15 to 20 minutes on technique and then spend the rest of the time, 60 to 75 minutes, learning repertoire. Now let me add some context. If you're preparing for a performance, the bulk of your time should go toward practicing and polishing that repertoire. If you're working on a specific technical issue, it makes sense to spend more time focusing on exercises that help you practice and improve. Above all, watch out for what I call warming up forever syndrome. I sometimes meet people who spend nearly their whole session on technique, and that's usually a form of procrastination and perfectionism. The whole point of technical work is to help you play your pieces better at the piano. One approach I recommend is breaking your session into segments. Start with sight reading and technique, and then work on your repertoire. Something new where you're still learning notes, something you're refining, and something you're polishing, for example. I think it's important to be working on pieces that are in different stages. That keeps your practicing fresh and interesting. Think of approaching your practicing like a chef making a multi-course meal. The chef doesn't start all of the dishes at the same time. Instead, the chef has an idea about how long it's going to take to make each dish and then plans accordingly. You put something in the oven, and while that's cooking, you work on a different dish. Having a layered approach to your practicing and keeping an overview of where you're at in the learning process for all of your pieces makes your practicing much more effective. Most importantly, your routine should reflect your needs and your priorities, and your needs and priorities are going to shift over time. This is where a good teacher comes in because they can help you by mapping out your goals and making appropriate assignments every week that will help you move toward those longer-term goals. Once you've started structuring your practice around what you're currently learning, you might also wonder, well, what about the pieces I've already learned? Should I keep practicing them? That's a question I got from Edie in South Carolina, who wrote, how much time, if any, should we spend on playing pieces that we learned in the past? Do pianists learn from playing old pieces? Does your answer change for those of us who are just playing for enjoyment and never plan to perform? This is a great question. Here's the simple answer. Yes, if you want to keep a piece in your fingers, you do need to revisit it from time to time. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to keep practicing it every single day. I see this all the time. Somebody prepares a piece for a recital, they perform it, and it sounds fantastic, but then they never touch it again. Within just a few weeks or months, the piece is gone. When you only focus on learning new repertoire, those older pieces will start to fade away. It doesn't matter if you're playing recreationally or preparing for a formal performance. Either way, there's a ton of value in keeping past pieces in your fingers. It reinforces your technique, it builds confidence, and it gives you that satisfaction and the pure pleasure of playing something you know really well. It's actually not that dissimilar from learning a language. I used to be fluent in German when I was younger, a long time ago, because I spent several years living and studying in Germany. But I don't speak it very much anymore here in Indianapolis, and it really shows. If I were to go back and spend a lot of time in Germany again, it would come back pretty quickly, although probably not to the level I spoke it when I was younger. That's how learning music on an instrument works too. You have to use it or lose it. And to those of you who don't plan to perform, playing a piece you've already learned all the way is the reward in itself. That's the part where you get to enjoy the music you've worked so hard to learn. So yes, build your repertoire and revisit those pieces after you've learned them. Before we get into the next question, I want to quickly tell you about my weekly newsletter, Notes from the Piano Prof. I send it most Sundays, and it's a little space in your inbox each week where we step away from the noise and reconnect with why we love the piano, whether you're a pianist, a teacher, or just someone who loves music. Every issue includes practice tips, helpful resources, behind-the-scenes stories, a little reflection by me, and a few extra things that don't make it into these videos. It's totally free. I don't spam you. And of course, you can unsubscribe anytime. You can scan this QR code to subscribe using your phone camera, and I'll also put the link in the description below this video. Now let's talk about how to keep up old repertoire. Marisol asks, how do you keep up repertoire? Do you have a list of 10 to 15 works and you rotate through them? How often? I'm just beginning, but I already have a few pieces I want to keep and I struggle to find time to fit them into my daily practice. Yes, this is a great question. Have you ever been out somewhere socially and someone found out you play the piano and then they said, oh, you should play something right here on this piano that happens to be right here in the corner. And you had to say, I don't really have anything ready, so I can't play for you today. Yeah, that's exactly the kind of moment that we are trying to avoid here. It all starts with learning how to keep a repertoire list and then keeping that list updated. So let's start with that. Here's how to make a repertoire list. You can use an online document like Google Docs or Notion, or you can use a physical notebook for this part. On a page, write down every piece you've played. Start with the composer's name, last name, first name, and then list the piece title, including all of the information about the piece. Also, make sure to write down which movement or movements that you learned of this piece. Like maybe you just learned the first movement of a sonata. Now, if you've performed it, mark it with an asterisk. And you can even make a note of the date and location so you can track that too. If you're working out of a method book, you might not need to keep a separate list. You can just write in the book as you go through to note which pieces you've learned. But once you're learning repertoire pieces outside of a method book, it's really worth keeping a written list where you can keep track of what you've already played. Over time, this list becomes the master list of everything that you've played at the piano, and from there, you decide which pieces you want to keep in rotation. Don't try to keep everything alive, it's just too much. But do select a few pieces you really love or that you've noticed people particularly enjoy hearing you play. Now, reviewing older pieces doesn't require the same intensity of practice as learning them for the first time, but it is still practice. You are still practicing. It's a different type of practice where you're maintaining and deepening rather than learning something fresh, but nonetheless, it's important and valuable practice. With regard to how often to review older pieces, one helpful strategy is to pick one day a week, maybe Fridays, as your repertoire day. Several pianists I know actually do this. They spend part of their practice time on one day a week playing through pieces that they've already learned just to keep them fresh and in their fingers. You can also work old repertoire into your warm-up or cool-down. Some pianists begin their practice every day with a Bach prelude or a favorite Chopin piece, and it's a lovely way to connect with music you know and a great way to ease into your session. Here's something else that's very effective at keeping pieces in your repertoire. Once you've learned a piece, put it away for a while. Then a few weeks later, pull it back out and relearn it. Do this cycle 2 or 3 times, spacing it out. So for example, let's say that you spend 2 months working on a piece and you get it to the point where you can play it quite well. Instead of continuing to practice it regularly, set it aside for 6 weeks and don't touch it. Then take it out again and practice it for 3 or 4 weeks and relearn it, and then put it away for a while and let it rest again. Each time you put a piece away and come back to it, your grasp of it will be deeper and more secure. Now, this takes planning and it takes a lot of lead time, but this technique is a great way to build repertoire that stays with you for years. Speaking of practicing, let's talk about Hanon. I get a lot of questions about Hanon. Some people love to practice Hanon and swear by it, while other people don't find Hanon exercises helpful or enjoyable at all. Jean asks, should you use Hanon before you begin playing each day? Okay, well, this is very subjective, and I don't think there's a universal answer for this question. First off, when we talk about Hanon, we're talking about the collection of 5-finger patterns that make up the first section of this book that's called Hanon the Virtuoso Pianist. And so the most famous one of these is the one that goes, etc. And then there are different variations on that, like even the second one is, and there's a lot of different combinations of fingers and 5-finger patterns. This is what we're talking about usually when we talk about Hanon. The full book has scales, double notes, octaves, and various other passage work and finger exercises, and those are later in the book. But generally speaking, when we're talking and debating Hanon and the utility of it, we're talking about this whole first section where it's different types of 5-finger patterns. Now, that said, I'll be honest, and I'm sure I'm going to get more comments from some of you who disagree with me. I don't personally spend time on Hanon, and I rarely assign it to my students. I just don't see as much value in it as some other teachers do. It takes quite a bit of time to cycle through the entire sequence of a pattern, and I feel that the skills it teaches you, which are basically finger dexterity and coordination, are better taught either in other collections or exercises or in repertoire itself. Practicing Hanon can feel kind of like jogging on a treadmill. It keeps you moving, it gives you some exercise, but it doesn't always take you anywhere musically, and it's really not scenic. That said, when I was a child, I did learn some of the Hanon exercises, and I think it's good to be familiar with them and at least learn some of the basic patterns. But let's zoom out for a second. Instead of focusing only on Hanon, let's talk about how to start your practice every day and the role technical exercises more generally can play in that, because I think that is the crux of the question. How do I even start my practice every day? In this arena, there are two main schools of thought here, and I actually identify with both. The first school of thought says, start your practice every day with technique. Practice scales, arpeggios, technical exercises, and etudes, and use them to warm up your hands and your ears. Now, the idea behind that is to ease into practice, physically and mentally, just like you might warm up before you play a sport. Now, I agree that warming up at the beginning of your practice day can be very helpful, but for that to be effective, you need to play your warm-ups musically. Don't just run through them on autopilot and wait to get to the good stuff after you're done. Work on them musically, whether it's scales or Hanon. Listen to yourself. Listen to the sound quality. Play with a singing tone. Make sure that you're playing every note with a robust quality of sound. Use the opportunity of playing scales or Hanon to shape and phrase and practice those musical skills. Make music, even if you're practicing technical work. Now, the second school of thought says, skip the warm-ups and jump straight into practicing your repertoire. The rationale behind this school of thought is, if your mind and spirit are fresh and raring to go at the beginning of a practice day, why waste that creative energy on playing rote exercises? And honestly, I agree with that too. If you sit down ready to make music and excited to play the piano, you don't want to numb yourself and dampen your enthusiasm by grinding through something lifeless. And that is one of my main beefs with Hanon. I think it is painfully dull. And it can be tedious for many people to play. If you're starting your practice day by doing something that's ungratifying or dull or tedious, it may actually hurt your motivation and focus. Like if you just want to play a recreational game of pickup basketball, you can just show up with your friends and play the game. You don't necessarily have to do a bunch of team drills or whatever before you let yourselves play for fun. And that's the thinking behind this second school of thought. They're saying you can learn what you need to learn technically and musically from practicing repertoire. Now, personally, in my own practice, I go through phases. Sometimes I will jump straight into repertoire I'm learning. I don't have a lot of practice time and I want to just get right to it. Other times, I'll feel like I need more inspiration, and so I'll warm up with something very beautiful that I love to play that I'm not currently preparing for a performance, something like a Bach partita or a Bach prelude and fugue, something that I just love to play. And that is really just to ground myself musically and connect myself to the music that I'm about to practice. There are other times when I really feel like I need to follow a structured technical routine. I do have a 12-minute warm-up that I've developed over the years where I cycle through all the major and minor scales and I play 6, 10ths, and arpeggios. I do that all in 12 minutes. It's very fast and I kind of get it out of the way and then I move on to my practice. On this channel, in my other videos, I do talk a lot about warm-up routines. That's because I do believe scales, arpeggios, and basic technical patterns are important. And if you don't know them well, you do need to learn them. Starting your session with technique is a great way to make sure it doesn't get left out of your practice. It's kind of like exercise. If you get up and you do your exercise first thing in the morning, you've gotten it out of the way and you don't need to try to find time later in the day to fit it in. So back to the question, what's my personal recommendation? Rather than starting with Hanon, which is based on musical patterns that do not occur a lot organically in the repertoire, I suggest warming up with scales or arpeggios or even 5-finger patterns, depending on your level. Any kind of technical exercises that are relevant to what you're learning. If you're learning 2-octave scales, practice those. If you're exploring minor scales, spend time there. If you're playing a piece that has a lot of double thirds in it, then work on a double thirds exercise or scales and double thirds just to kind of practice. You can even take pieces of your repertoire and turn them into finger exercises so that you can practice the technique that you're learning. No matter what you're playing though, remember, make it musical, play musically. Now, I want to get back to this questions that I get about practicing and structuring your practice. I think there's often a fear of doing it wrong. And so I want to just say, the fact of the matter is you learn the most by sitting down and practicing. Don't worry about getting it perfect every time. Don't worry that you're doing something wrong. Just start. And over time, you'll figure out how to make your own practice more effective, more efficient, and more enjoyable for yourself. You can take advice from me or from your teacher. I hope you're taking advice from your teacher if you have one, but no one can practice for you. Only you know what you want out of your piano playing, and your goals are going to evolve over time. Thank you to everyone who submitted a question for my series. As I mentioned earlier, this video is part of my 25K Q&A series where I'm answering the questions you sent in to me. Earlier in this video, I talked about how to structure your practice session, but I only had time to scratch the surface of that topic. If you'd like a deeper dive on that, check out this video right up there where I walk through my STEAM practice method for planning your sessions. This is going to incorporate sight reading, technique, etudes and exercises, analysis, and music. If this video helped you, please do like it, subscribe to my channel, and share it with someone who might enjoy it. I'll see you in the next video. Happy practicing!